So, will aliens shed a tear when they hear a Beethoven string quartet? It's a banality to say that music is a universal language. We believe this so fervently that we sent a golden record into space. You guys probably know about this. Carl Sagan and the team decided this was the best way to preserve humanity's legacy in the 1970s. On it, we included Bach, Beethoven, and Mozart. And I think about this all the time. I think if we, if I really wanted to make money on the speaking circuit, I could simply develop a talk about the universal language of music and how it's the simplest and purest form of communication. I would probably paraphrase Plato and talk about how music is unconscious philosophy, about how music is pieces of a higher dimension, or I'd paraphrase Schopenhauer and Leibniz and talk about how music is unconscious philosophy, as Schopenhauer said, or unconscious calculation, as Leibniz said. Please note that these brilliant men both said the same nonsensical thing. Or I could repeat any number of casual, meaningless observations by famous people, like one of my favorites, Music is Organized Sound by Edgar Varese, which in another talk I've demonstrated can be extrapolated to mean that music is literally every phenomenon in the known universe. Music is life itself. Louis Armstrong, one of my favorite performers ever, but I'm not sure what that means. And then this is my absolute favorite piece of music, Pablum, which is music is the soundtrack of your life. And Dick Clark said this. It used to be written on the wall in his restaurants. And I went to one of his restaurants once and I saw it written on the wall. And I just thought, what the hell does that possibly mean? That is like to borrow from Bertrand Russell, that is like saying a four-footed animal is an animal. So, but it's not really up for debate that music has the power to bring people together, or that music has the power to genuinely stir people's emotions and rouse their spirits. But music is neither unique nor particularly efficient at these tasks. Speech has the same properties, perhaps even to a greater degree, and so does writing. I don't know of an instance when a piece of music has even performed repeatedly over a long period of time has incited an otherwise reasonable group of people to wage war against their neighbors or to demonize other humans because of superficial physical characteristics. But speech has certainly done that, and so has writing. I can't tell, Fleetwood, I guess that's Will. Are you raising your hand?
I think he's climbing up the back of this.
Oh, you're fine. Okay, sorry.
All right, that's right. The best I can do is sitting on the chair at the moment.
No, all good. I'm glad I asked. I don't think I've said anything particularly contentious yet. I'm just trying to set the stage here. But I'm not here to tell you about music's deficiencies. I love music, and I don't actually believe that it has any deficiencies. But the way that we mysticize music, I think, exposes some of the problems in our own perception more generally. So I'm not the first to think about this, but I do think I'm unique in thinking about it in a time when the discussion about what music is actually has stakes. This has been an ongoing discussion, but there was never a time when machines were going to possibly take over the skill and craft of music making. So AI is going to, where was I? Stakes, namely, we're trying to explain music to artificial intelligence, and it's not going particularly well. AI is going to run with whatever we tell it and produce unfathomable amounts of music based on the information that we train it on. So we're on the verge of this artistic partnership with machines, and so I started thinking about some of the assumptions we make when listening to music when Dan sent me a link to this OpenAI project. Now, you can't probably read it, and it doesn't really matter that you can't read it. I'll just tell you what it is. It is a music-making AI, and it's important to note that, did we go backwards there? It's important to, you put them both on the same thing. So I'm going to play some of the music that this AI came up with, just a few pieces of it. And it says, they say in the abstract that MuseNet was not explicitly programmed with our understanding of music, but instead discovered patterns of harmony, rhythm, and style by learning to predict the next token in hundreds of thousands of MIDI files. And the point of this talk is really to explain to you that we make a lot of assumptions about what the rules of music are that we don't understand or we don't realize. So here's what MuseNet came up with. So this is, can you hear me while this is playing?
Yeah, it's perfectly fine.
Great. So I think this is like Beethoven in the style of Rachmaninoff. It's not bad. Oh.
You have to stop the other.
So this is some jazz. I mean, I don't know about the sampled drums, but the piano sounds kind of legit. And this is my favorite. So this is bluegrass. So this was the one. This one, when I heard it for the first time, was the one that sort of scared me into taking AI music a little bit more seriously, until I realized that like what makes bluegrass is actually really simple music, but what makes it awesome is what makes it great is the speed and the virtuosity with which you have to play it fast. But when you're playing it back on a MIDI roll, you don't have to, there's no virtuosity required. You just tell it to play it fast, and it does. So if you listen to it in that light, it's pretty stupid. You know, it's just a couple major arpeggios, but it's cool. It's not. And let's see. Someone said, not a surprise that jazz is easy for AI to pull off. Yeah, it should actually be quite a surprise, but we'll talk about that later. And I don't know if it pulled it off. I mean, this is jazz sounding nonsense, but it's not. It doesn't really have any structure to it. But Eleanor, I take that very personally, because I am my only actual training in life is as a jazz musician. So we could have a long talk about what is and is not jazz offline if you want. Transformer models. Someone is saying transformer model. Okay, I'm gonna let that. Not ragging on jazz. Okay, well, yeah, and yes, I was triggered. That's fine. Now you know how to get under my skin. So play some of MuseNet's audio. The results of MuseNets are impressive, but to me, they seem to suggest that simply by listening to music, AI will learn to generate new compositions in new styles. And what really caught my eye was that they specifically said that they had programmed it without our understanding of music. But I think perhaps unwittingly, they programmed it with pretty much everything you need to know about our understanding of music, which is right there. This is obviously a keyboard, it's one iteration of a keyboard, but it's likely the only one that most people have ever seen. And most people educated in the West know that, also this is the part where I think you guys could stop me for questions, because this might not make any sense. So here we go, I'm gonna dive into it. Most people educated in the West know that music has 12 pitches, designated by 7 alphabetical letters, which are modified by sharps and flats. The sharp makes the pitch higher, while the flat makes the pitch lower. This naming scheme can produce one pitch with 2 names, also known as an n-harmonic equivalent. For example, A sharp and B flat are the same pitch. F sharp and G flat are the same pitch, etc. Everyone took music lessons as a kid or something, or as an amateur musician? None of this is new information, or do I need to explain n-harmonic equivalents a little bit?
I think.
Does anyone have a question about n-harmonic equivalents?
I think I'm following, and I'm about as clueless as anyone, I think.
Okay, good. Yeah. Sorry, one of the things I have to adjust for when I do talks is that almost all of my friends are professional musicians. So I once did a talk where I put up the punchline of a joke was a score, was like a page of a score, that if you read the page of the score, it would, land my joke. And I did it for a bunch of people who aren't musicians, and nobody knew what it was, obviously, because not everybody knows how to read an orchestral score. So this is, this 12-note system up here, the keyboard, is actually an approximation known as equal temperament, which is a compromise to make all 12 keys sound the same. Detractors, among whom I do not count myself, but detractors would say that it makes all 12 keys sound equally bad. And I'm going to explain why in a moment. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the math here, because frankly, it's probably extremely obvious and elementary to this group, and trying to explain it in too much detail will only showcase my ignorance and bore the shit out of you. But so we're all on the same page. Just allow me a few moments to talk about the harmonic series. So if you pluck a taut string, say the note A at 440 hertz, or I should be more specific, contemporary A, which is 440 hertz, you stop the string exactly in the middle, you get A an octave higher, which is 880 hertz. If you stop it at exactly 2/3, you get E, which is the perfect fifth at 660 hertz. The fifth and the octave are pure or perfect intervals in music parlance, which just means that they're the simplest. I think they're also the loudest. And the fifth and the octave were the only intervals used in early and medieval music, and it probably is because they're the loudest. So it's desirable that the division of notes into smaller intervals be based on the fifth for 2 reasons. 1, it's a pure interval, and 2, it is the simplest. It's the simplest interval other than the octave, and you can't base a different notes on an octave because it's the same note. If you stack 12 fifths on top of each other, you get the 12 notes of the Western chromatic scale. And I have a slide, and here it is. Right? So this is the circle of fifths. So anyone who took a couple years of music probably got to this point. But this is how we derive the 12 notes in the Western scale. We do 12. We stack 12 fifths on top of each other, which gives us 7 octaves. Right? So ideally, the 12 fifths should resolve after 7 octaves. But what actually happens is that deriving the notes by fifths leaves you about a quarter tone too high at the 7th octave. We're all okay. I'll assume someone will ask questions if I'm not making sense. So we're about a quarter tone too high at the 7th octave, and you can see I've done that with a little graphic here where the circle doesn't quite compete. And I'm going to play you what this difference sounds like, I think. So this is, we might not have this file. I don't remember. Let's find out. So, sorry, I should have warned you. I'm going to play some like really annoying sounding tones in a few minutes. So just sorry, guys. So this is a 1K tone. This is 1,000 hertz. Now, this is 1,014 hertz, which sounds like not that much of a difference, but this is the difference between where where the 12 fifths should resolve and where it does resolve. Right? So if I play these two together, you can't really hear the difference if I play them separately. If I play them together, now I'm going to play those two pitches at the same time. So you can hear by the beating that they are not even close to each other, and they are very noticeably far apart. So this discrepancy, in this case 14 hertz, is known as the comma. And equal temperament simply lowers each of the 12 fifths in the 7 octaves by 1/12 of the comma to make the 7th octave pure. It's a pretty elegant solution because it's not that much of a change. But the problem is that when you do this, it throws off some of the other ratios. And I guess I should probably say that the goal of equal temperament is to make all 12 notes the same distance apart from each other, which naturally they are not. They're varying distances, which would make playing in different keys sound different. I'm going to explain that in a second. So this brings us to the very important interval of the 5-4 ratio, which is the major third, and this is the chord that makes a major chord major. So it's a pretty important interval, and by adjusting all of the fifths down by a comma, what we end up with is a major third that is a little bit too wide. So meaning that every major third in Western music that you've ever heard is sharp. So that's A at 440. And there's C sharp at whatever it's supposed to be. That's a natural Pythagorean C sharp. Sorry, is it 14? And that is a tempered C sharp. You can't hear the difference. That is C sharp tempered and C sharp Pythagorean together. You can hear that there's quite a lot of beating there, so they're not even close. This is E at 660. So that's Pythagorean E. This is tempered E. Sorry, someone asked Pythagorean. So Pythagorean temperament is just temperament based on math and not taking any kind of adjusting of notes into account. So in Pythagorean temperament, this slide that I have up here, that would just be what it is. We wouldn't actually derive 12 notes in Pythagorean temperament. We would derive, I think, 19. And the octave after 12 octaves just wouldn't be the same because that's just how it is in nature. So it's just natural temperament. But thank you for asking me to explain. So where are we? 17. And so this is the fifth, the tempered fifth and the natural fifth together. You can hear that's some pretty sweet beating right there. And then here's really the showpiece of this whole thing. So I'm going to play you first. This is a Pythagorean, also known as just major triad. So it's going to be all those notes I just played. It's the root, the third, and the fifth in perfect mathematical proportion. So that sounds like a major chord to you guys, right? I would imagine, because it is. Now here is a equal temperament major chord with the adjustments that we just heard and talked about. Now, I don't know if that sounds as offensive to you as it does to me after hearing the first one. Let me play it again. So here's natural. All right, thank you, Eleanor. And then here's equal temperament. So yeah, you hear how much beating. Here's equal temperament again. You hear how much beating is going on in the major third. Now, so that major third, that major chord, that is every major chord you've played on guitar. That is every major chord you would play on the piano. That is what every major chord that you've probably ever heard in your entire life sounds like. It is completely out of tune. Yeah, we don't just play pure sine waves usually, but it's even worse because the sine waves don't have overtones, but notes on a violin do, and notes on a trumpet do. So it's actually worse on real instruments than it is in a sine wave. And I was going to try to demonstrate that, but I didn't have time to. I also can't get people together to play instruments at this time because we're in a pandemic. So this means that every major chord in every key in equal temperament is out of tune. Out of tune with what? Out of tune with nature. So basically, all the music you love is a crime against nature. But it wasn't always this way. Up until the 20th century, musicians tuned in different temperaments depending on the situation. Half steps, the smallest division of pitch, in equal temperament. The difference between B and C, or the difference between C and C sharp, were known to have two sizes, a major and a minor. The sharp was the minor half step, and the flat of the next note was the major half step. I have a little. Where is that slide? Oh, because I was supposed to show these slides. Sorry. Anyway, I was going to show these slides, and then I didn't.
Just keep going.
Just going to keep going until I get to that. So as you can see here, now if I were in a classroom, I would point to stuff, and I'm very animated, so you'll have to just take my word for that. But you can see here, this is just a diagram from A to B as a whole step, and we're used to seeing the half step. We're used to the half step, which is A sharp or B flat, being one note, which is exactly in the middle. But in reality, B flat is a little bit higher than A sharp, and that is just. Oh, sorry, that's Russell. And that is, interestingly, that is how string players play when they're not playing with keyboard instruments. So this led to this multiple accidentals led to not 12 notes, but 19 notes. And keyboards in the 18th, 17th, and 18th century looked like this. So I don't know how well. Let me turn around. Yeah, you can see. So you can see that there's a white note between B and C and between E and F, which we don't have. That is F sharp, I think. And you can see that the black notes all have two notes on them. And this was a just temperament keyboard. So in flat keys, you would use the flats, and in sharp keys, you would use the sharps. And they stopped using this really because it was just very difficult to play, and because this is a harpsichord, it was extremely difficult to tune. So does someone have a hand raised back there? I can't tell if that's okay.
I think it's Russell hanging off the back of the chair.
Oh, got it. All right. So far, no questions, right?
No.
So good. So these more mathematically correct systems had the effect of giving different keys different characters. By more mathematically correct, I mean this like the systems that would have been played with this enharmonic keyboard or the Pythagorean system had the effect of giving different keys different characters because the intervals were not always the same distance apart. So the interval of a third might, the key of A might have a wide major third, while the key of C might have a narrow major third, etc. And when Bach wrote his chaconne in D minor, it might have been because D minor was in fact the saddest of all keys. That is a Spinal Tap joke, so it might be under the radar of some of you, because it is a really stupid joke from a really stupid movie, but I stand by it. And as a part of my challenge, I can't offer you anything, but if anyone can tell me the song that Nigel Tufnell wrote in the key of D minor, the saddest of all keys, you will forever have my approval. Anyway, we'll never know if D minor was the saddest of all keys because we have no way of knowing for sure what temperament Bach intended violinists to use when performing this piece. It was probably obvious to the violinists at the time, but it's simply a lost convention to us, the same way we don't specify a temperament on scores today. I'm sure that some scholars figured it out to a high degree of certainty, but either way, it's not the way that the piece is performed anymore. We perform it in equal temperament today. But to get back to MuseNet, so when I suggested that they unwittingly program the rules of music, I was referring to this keyboard. Equal temperament exists so that the keyboard instruments with fixed tunings can play with strings and with brass instruments in all 12 keys and not sound out of tune. This bias is built into MIDI, and MIDI displays notes on a piano roll, as MIDI displays notes on a piano roll. So asking an AI to interpret and return results in MIDI is de facto instructions in the rules of Western music. It gives instruction about temperaments and how we divide the octave into 12 notes. MIDI also shows events in a timeline on a grid, such as events in time on a grid. So you're telling the AI not to just figure out mathematical relationships between pitches, but to look at X and Y in only one direction and only pay attention to certain values in order to find patterns, which is seems to me like it'd be a much simpler task. Russell likes keyboard. All right, I'm with you, Russell. I like it too. So why does this matter? I mentioned that early medieval music only used the interval of the fifth and the octave, and this persisted for hundreds of years. Medieval composers and performers didn't think that they were working in the infancy of their art any more than like a railroad operator today would think he was working during the infancy of rail travel. What they were doing had already been around for centuries. Early medieval composers were working with well-established and centuries-old traditions. If they had invented AI, if the medieval composers had invented AI, it would probably only have produced music with intervals of fifths and octaves. So it would have been extremely limited by our current standards. We have this narrative bias towards our own time. We view today as the culmination of a series of deliberate, well-considered, and ultimately inevitable decisions. It's common to think that we have things figured out and that we have some sort of advantage over our backwards ancestors, but pretty soon we're going to be the backwards ancestors. The assumptions we make about our arts, the decisions that were made long ago, and the many, many compromises made in the service of expedience all add up, in the case of music, not to a universal language, but to a system of conventions that is only intelligible to people who have spent a lifetime steeped in the culture that created them. If aliens play Voyager's Golden Record, they probably won't hear the genius of Bach, Mozart, and Beethoven. They'll hear arbitrary divisions of mathematical relationships with some apparent internal logic but no obvious purpose. They won't weep when they hear Beethoven. They'll just be confused. So that's my talk. Thank you very much. Do you guys have any questions?
I guess we maybe should have a convention of unmuting and clapping, because it's kind of sad to finish a talk and not hear clapping.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. I've actually gotten used to it because I've done a fair bit of sort of remote speaking, and I also did like a big talk to an empty auditorium. So I just assume people are clapping. I have the applause in my head at this point.
We could also have a convention of jumping up and down or Mexican wave bowing and our applause.
Yeah, that's good.
Something you said at the end, Lucas, thanks for the show. It was very cool. Something you said at the end that it would just sound like arbitrary noise with some internal logic. It reminds me of, I really like strange, obscure electronic music, and I assume that also sounds like arbitrary noise to the average person. I guess, what are your thoughts on sort of the relativism, not just like an alien looking at us, but like between different people on Earth?
Yeah, I mean, music is obviously subjective. I just think that, the reason that I decided to talk about this today was that I do actually get asked to give these sort of guru type talks about music as the universal language. And I mean, I probably should do it and just get a million Instagram followers. But I just think that notion is bullshit and also empirically false and not at all helpful. I think that, we're at a place in music where everything is this is probably the worst time in music history for AI to have come along, I think, because we've accepted so many conventions as true as normal, because music is so ubiquitous that once we adopt something, we just assume that that's how it has been forever and that's how it should be. You could listen to 1 billion hours of music and never encounter anything in just temperament, even though it was pretty much the standard 150 years ago. But like, you know, a lot of some of the decisions we've made around all aspects of music have just kind of been frozen in time by recording.
Do you think it's feasible or valuable to this? I don't think you mentioned, but some temperaments can be sort of better fit for some keys than others. Do you think it's worthwhile to try to tune to a key sometimes, or is it kind of is equal temperament good enough? This is an opinion question.
No, well, I have two thoughts on that. Like the first answer to that question is that a lot of music written before the 20th century was intended to be played in just temperament or in mean tone temperament, and I mean that is why sonatas and symphonies are in specific keys. You know, those. It always seemed, you know, it's not an eyeball saving exercise so that you don't have to write out sharps and flats. It's also so that the players would know how to tune, and they would know, you know, if you know that you're in the key of B flat and you're a viola player and you see you see an F sharp, then you know you have to play that. You know that's the fifth, and you're going to have to play that a little bit higher than you would in equal temperament. And you know, assuming that and you also have to know the orchestration and know that you're not playing that with the piano. So I'm sorry, I don't know if I've answered your question, but I think it's a dimension that we've lost, a dimension of music and a dimension of expression that we've just completely lost, because everything has been done in equal temperament since the 20th century, certainly since the dawn of recording, except for sort of esoteric things that are, you know, intentionally in different temperaments.
So Lucas, you focused on MIDI, I guess, because it makes the point very clearly. But I mean, of course, you could train something like MuseNet on pure audio, but it would probably reproduce the same bias towards this form of temperament that's become popular, right? There's nothing.
Well, they ask it to give results back in MIDI, which is I think really more where the.
But there are kind of similar models using the same kind of technology, but just more training time that would.
Yeah, but
train
none of them.
But
none of them have yielded like particularly interesting results.
Yeah.
This is why I singled out MuseNet, or none that I've heard anyway. We tried to use one of those when I did the Schubert project, and what it gave us back sounded like a cat walking on a piano. And that's also part of the reason that MuseNet is able to give back things that make a little bit more sense is when you're training it on audio, it doesn't, especially if you don't give it any musical training, it doesn't have any way of understanding the relationships between chords and, you know, rhythm and even like what instruments are what. So you know, the MIDI just gives it so much more information, and so that it makes sense to me that it would be able to give you back some stuff that is more coherent. I mean, the assumptions that we make, you know, when you hear a symphony orchestra, you know it's a symphony orchestra. But if you could play 1,000 hours to 100,000 hours of symphony music to an AI, it's never going to figure out what a violin is. Although maybe that's an interesting project, actually. Now that I think about it, I would love to have someone program an AI, play it a bunch of orchestral music, and then ask it to, you know, give you a picture of the instruments that it thinks is playing of.
Well, am I wrong? But is this somewhat sort of separate to the thrust of your talk? I mean, even if it figured out what individual instruments were, I mean, maybe you're skeptical, but this wouldn't put a dent in the argument you were making just now, right? I mean,
no, it's not. You're absolutely right. I just think it would be an interesting idea. But this has been my biggest sort of, you know, I'm like a bit of a music AI evangelist, but also a music AI skeptic. In that I think it can be a really useful tool, but I don't think it's anything really other than a tool.
I had a question, Lucas. So it sounds like part of your argument is that we have these kind of like constraints in our music writing that are just there by convention, such as equal temperament and roots on the piano and violin and all the stuff that you're saying. But if you give all of that to an AI and then it goes away and it writes something which you say, oh, this sounds like a cat walking on the piano, then isn't it maybe just the same things happening, but the other way around? Like they've come up with some kind of convention that we can't perceive, and so we're the aliens going like, oh, that just sounds like noise with some meaningless logic behind it. But wouldn't it maybe be interesting to go and find out what pattern they've come up with or created, and it might give us like unique ways of understanding or creating music or something like that?
Yeah, you just blew my mind a little bit. I think I actually, when I got back the cats walking on the piano, that actually was my first thought. Was I thought, let me listen to this and like see what like it must be thinking something. You know, I mean, I'm using all these verbs that are humanizing the machine, but like it must have some logic to what it's doing. And in the specific case of the model that we were using, I don't think that it did, because there just wasn't. There just didn't seem to be any logic to it. None that I could decipher.
And it'd be amazing if you could extract it from it somehow. I know that's an open question in AI at the moment, but somehow extract the pattern from the AI entity that has come up with it. And so even if you can look at it and then say like, oh, that's what it's doing, yes, that's definitely meaningless. That's very different to not looking at it and being like, this seems meaningless. You know what I mean?
Sure. And my argument is not that AI can't do something because it's complicated. My argument is that we are not necessarily the best teachers because we hold a lot of assumptions that we're not necessarily aware of. So and this is sort of the urgency of this for me, is that I think that music is so what I call I haven't really come up with a great term for it yet, but like what I call second order music, which is like music that is not designed to be heard. It is designed to serve some other purpose other than to be listened to. That kind of music, I think, is going to start being made by AI increasingly because it's functionally free. And the companies who make, if you are a company that makes AI music and can sell it to YouTube creators and reality show producers, you can actually make a ton of money. Like the market is billions of dollars.
Yeah,
so
that makes sense.
So that is going to happen because it is technically possible and it is potentially very profitable. So I want that music to be good. Like I don't want that music to be terrible. Like I want it to be as good as it can be because it's going to be most of the music that most people hear.
Yeah. So what's an example of function that music can play that's not to be listened to? I'm a little confused about what you mean by that.
Yeah, music in an elevator, music on hold, music under sports highlights when you're watching highlights of a sports game, music in reality television. I mean, any music that you wouldn't, I mean, you're aware, I mean, most people aren't aware that this music exists until I mention it to them, and then they're like, oh, right, there is literally music everywhere in my life.
Yeah. I thought maybe you meant music for the sake of transmitting data or something. Like, like truly, its role is not to be listened to, but it just turns out to be like some efficient means of some other application.
That's my plan to get a deferment from fighting in World War III, is to like come up with some system of like
just try the most beautiful.
There's a Jonathan sketch about that.
And then everyone's arm in arm singing tunes together rather than fighting in a war. That sounds really good.
But yeah, it's the like all this type of music. I mean, one of the I'm working on some more material around this, and one of the things that I've found out, or the statistics I found out, is the Beatles have written in their career wrote about 150 tracks, give or take. The largest production music library in the UK, which is APM, I think they're the largest in the world, has 750,000 tracks in its catalog. So this music that is not meant to be heard, as I call, or second order music, as I call it, production music, as it's usually called, is 100 times more by volume than the popular music people listen to.
Well, it's dark matter.
Yeah, some of it is pretty dark.
Dark music. There, you've got the term for it now.
Dark music. Oh man, that's it. I'm writing it down. That's it. All right. Credit to Dr. Murphy. Do you guys have any other questions? Is there anything else? I mean, I'll talk about this forever.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Sorry to interrupt, James. I'll just say that. I mean, I think it's good if we just continue this conversation while the challenges are going, right? So that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe let's have one final question, and then I'll introduce the challenges, and then we can, Lucas can stay around and answer questions for as long as he has time. So go ahead.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I'm curious. This has always been something I'm actually kind of curious about the significance of 12 notes in a scale, and I wonder if that's one of the things that you sort of mentioned, that it's very much tied to just sort of Western music, or sort of I guess what people are used to. Because it seems to me that you could just subdivide like an octave as much as you wanted, right?
Right. So Dan brought this up because you know, like every idea that I've ever run by Dan, he's always, you know, explaining to me how the Chinese did it better or did it sooner or did it, you know, at the same time as us, but in a more clever way.
Sure.
And equal temperament is no exception. So equal temperament was discovered by the Chinese around the same time that it was discovered or invented or whatever you want to call it by the Europeans. And I looked into this a little bit. There are a couple of reasons why it might have been discovered at the same time, which is just that, you know, these two civilizations were like kind of in communication. So they might have just heard each other's music. That's certainly possible. But the division of 12 notes seems to have something to do with astrology, as stupid as that is, which is, and I couldn't nail this down, and so I didn't put it in the talk, but that would kind of be the ultimate point on my argument that like 12 notes is just something that we came up with because of constellations. And the paper in which the Chinese theoretician came up with equal temperament or described equal temperament is called something like bringing music into harmony with the months or something like that. So 12 is a number that we decided on because, you know, we thought because of in the West probably astrology, and both calendars had 12 months at the time, which I double checked. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I think 12 is an arbitrary number, and further research on my part is needed to sort of tease that out. But it seems like 19, because a lot of Indian music has 19 notes in a scale, in a chromatic scale, and it seems like 19 for some reason makes sense. But I don't know if that's, you know, arbitrary as well.
Sure. Yeah, it's one of those things that's kind of frustrating to listen to, is that I can sort of think in my head, oh, there's not really any particular reason why you should stop at 12 divisions, but because I'm so ingrained in just listening to music that people have been making for thousands of years, it's like it's impossible for me to, like, if you have something that's like halfway between two semitones, it just sounds weird.
Yeah, the bottom line is music is a language that more people understand than are able to speak. You know, yeah. And that's really just what it is at the end of the day. But yeah, you're right. It's I mean, I can send you, or maybe I'll put in the chat, or like if on my YouTube video, I want to link to this great piece that I found researching this talk called Microtonal Etudes by an American composer whose name I'm blanking on now. But it's just sort of classical sounding music, but I think he uses a 19-note scale, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating to listen to. And if you listen to it, like, and I encourage you to do this experiment, if you listen to that microtonal music for a couple of days exclusively, and then go back and listen to Western music, the music that you're used to, it sounds out of tune.
It sounds like a good way to ruin all music for me. When I go back, I can never unhear it. Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah,
that's my goal.
That does sound interesting. Yeah.
That's a good note to end on, I think. Okay, so let me explain how the challenges will work. So there's 2 challenges. In a moment, I'll click the Start Challenge button up here, and there'll appear some leaderboard to the right of the presenter display. The first challenge is a proofwriting competition. You'll notice around this arena, platform, whatever, there's kind of 3 groups of whiteboards, so we'll divide up into 2 or 3 teams, depending how many people stick around for that. And there'll be a competition writing a proof of the Chinese remainder theorem. Will explain a bit more about that in a second. The second challenge is a coin hunt, which takes place all around this this map. Okay, so if you want to stay for the proofwriting competition, then stay up here. If you want to hunt for coins, the only way down is to jump. So, ready, 5, 4. The person with the most coins wins. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Why it's not going? There we go. So these wooden things sticking out of the cliff, these are actually things you'll find on mountains in China.
Send me a photo.
Yeah.
Who was that?
Oh,
I got it.
yeah, someone's in there. Oh.
That's where I got most of my coins, but I left a bit early, I guess.
Dad, faces, I'm happy faces and proof.
Alright. The 3 coins at the top are about to fall. Done.
What is sweet going at the top
Okay.
about to fall?
So maybe there's some left over here. I can see, no. There's a few more. No, they've been gotten as well. Okay, we should be getting close.
Does something trigger when we get all of
Yeah,
them?
there'll be a victory noise. Okay, so there is an extra cave in the solar peak, and 3 inside that, which haven't been obtained. So I'm looking currently. I can detach my camera. So I'm looking currently at 3 that are remaining.
How can you look out
In the
so
what
like
peak?
this?
Solar peak, the place where the eclipse.
Where's
where
that?
you can see the eclipse by the silhouette of the sun. And
If I leave the game, I
no,
lose
no,
my
you'll
coins.
lose coins.
I don't know where that is.
Where is the silhouette pointing?
Down.
Down.
Oh, hey, Spencer, you made it.
Pointing down. At least the bottom is pointing down. This is my proof. Sad faces.
Okay, who got the coins at the top of the icy mountain, at the top of the snow?
I did.
Okay, you missed 2. You missed 2
I-
coins.
Oh, sorry, no, not the
Okay.
snow.
He missed 2
I
coins.
got the coins at the top of the island.
He missed 2 coins where?
I got those ones. Whoops.
Is that camera right there?
Okay, these are still in play as well. Okay, I count 8 that I can see that people haven't gotten yet. Oh wow, look at all those faces. That's what a classroom looks like. You just drawn a classroom. Theorem. Proof. End of the proof. Any questions? And that's what they all look like.
Yes, some of them
yeah,
are happy
there's-
and some of them are
Yeah,
sad.
there's 2 happy faces in the midst of all those sad people. That's about right. Well done. Ah,
Is that you one cool chat?
congratulations.
That was me? Was that me?
Okay, well done.
Who won?
Billy on 32.
Who won?
Billy.
Oh.
Yay!
Which ones did you just get?
World. I got shot right off the world.
Oh, did you
I
have
was
some
watching
sideways
that,
velocity as
watching.
well?
I did.
Oh,
I am respawned. I got shot right off the edge.
There's a proof over here. Is this yours, James? On the left.
That's right.
Why is there an NI?
I gotta say, I don't know how I feel about people doing math in the music building.
Why is there?
Why is there
why
an NI
there-
inverse there? What the hell's that?
So this is basically the
like
idea.
my
So it's
second
not
proof?
been pulled from thin air, right?
My
It's
second
basically
proof is
that
gonna win. My second proof.
and you want mi to be the
You
inverse
like
of the
my
ni
proof,
mod
Daddy?
Oh,
That-
yes, yes.
mod the other
Daddy,
one.
Just a second.
So that way, basically everything. This can if you're taking modulo m1, this thing
My second
cancels out because there's an m1 there, and this cancels out because they're inverses one another. So the only thing you're left is a,
Mm.
and similarly for m2,
Mhm.
I think you're left with is b.
If you say NI inverse mod NJ.
Oh, sorry, I got my m's and my n's
Yeah.
confused. Yeah, that's meant to be
Whoa.
modulo.
Whoa.
That's meant to be ni is mi inverse modulo nj.
Okay.
That's
I
what
just
that's
got
what I
launched.
meant to
I just got
write.
launched really far. I don't know what just happened. I got launched so far up that I couldn't see the world anymore, and then I fell all the way down.
Jackson, I'll jump on your head and then we walk
So-
on the chair slowly.
Yeah, hop on my head.
We know that ni
Alright, go.
is invertible
Yes,
mod
correct.
nj, right? And so what I'm saying is let mi be the inverse of ni.
Oh, with that.
That's nice.
I just saw one of you bounce.
Did you,
Yeah.
did you get flipped?
Taking your baby
Yeah.
I started flipping
Yeah.
as soon as we launched.
All right.
Yeah, me
Okay,
too.
Let's get up there. I'll turn the chair off, and you guys get
James,
positioned.
let's go
I'll
into
turn it back on.
the channel
Oh,
for this whiteboard.
Oh yeah, get out of it.
Those crazy people. Okay. Yeah, that part looks good. Okay, so given AB, define X equals AM2 N2 plus BM1 N1. Then X maps to modulo N1 maps to BM1. Sorry, modulo N1 maps to AM2N2. And
Yeah.
M2N2 modulo N1 is 1. Yep. Yep, good. I don't know about your injectivity though. Where's that?
It's not. But the two sets have the same cardinality, so it must be.
Okay.
Now I am aware that the reason that they have the same cardinality is because of the Chinese remainder theorem. But you know, that's not.
Okay,
That's not
you're inches away from winning the prize, but you're not there yet.
Oh, you can draw off the edge of the paper.
Did you hear that, James?
Finding all my bones.
James says, "Well done. You discovered a secret feature of the whiteboards."
Oh, yes.
Can paint off the edge.
That looked painful, Lucas. Oh no, that was Jackson. Okay. Therefore, okay, I give this the tick of the approval. Da-dung, da-dung, da-dung. Okay, James is the winner of Challenger 2A.
Am I gonna
And this
win?
isn't. Yeah, you. There's 2 winners of Challenge 2A, and you're one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, so
Because I
it's not
did.
nepotistic at all that the 2 winners were the 3. Well, 3 of the 4 winners were the 2 core developers, my son.
I love the fact that you placed the
Because I
market
did
so
the
that
drawing.
you can do this.
Oh man, I don't think I can. I think I'm too tall. Yeah. Just hang on for a second.
I wonder
The
if
challenges
short-
are over anyway, so this is a good time to wrap things up. So thanks everyone for participating, and thanks Lucas for the excellent talk. And I mean, this server just lives on here, so feel free to hang around. But I think we'll all get back to work now, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, see you next week, guys.
Thanks,
It's
Tom.
like the
Thanks for the talk. Thanks for
chocolate
organising
or
it.
not.
Thanks for listening. And see you later, Russell.
Lucas says
Bye-bye,
bye.
buddy.